Welcome, everyone. It is 12:01. I don't know where you're at, but where I'm at, it is beautiful. Yesterday was beautiful in its own way. It was very, very rainy and stormy here, but it was a nice day. Kind of felt like a fall day. Today is a nice sunny day. It's probably going to get close to 70 degrees, so I may have to go hang outside somewhere afterwards. If I have not had the pleasure of meeting you yet, I'm Gina Woodward. I'm the Regional Director for the Small Business Development Center at West Texas A&M University. My office is here in Amarillo, and then our university is on campus in Canyon. I've got a couple of very, very special guests joining me today. You're probably used to seeing just me. We've got some really special people here, and I'd like to briefly introduce them, and then you're going to get to meet them and talk with them some more later. First, we've got Justin Trammell. Justin is officially here on behalf of the Canyon Farmers Market, but he also stays very, very busy on his own. He's got a local business that does meat processing, and then recently opened a storefront in Canyon where he sells the meat that he processes for himself, others, along with locally produced vegetables, microgreens, all kinds of amazing foods. He's so unique in the industry that he serves, and we're really fortunate to have him in the area. But he's also done a lot of advocating on behalf of everyone who's operating under cottage law. So he's going to have some updates for us a little bit later about what they're going to be working on this next legislative session. And then the other person joining me, she's kind of my cottage law idol. She's the one who, if you have been on one of these webinars before, we do this particular webinar every spring. When you ask me questions and I don't know the answer, Kelly Masters is one of the people that I contact afterwards to get the right answer. Kelly is with Homemade Texas. She was one of the original authors of the Texas Cottage Laws, has stayed involved in that process and works closely with Justin and many others who are advocating on behalf of all of you working under cottage laws to pass some what we certainly think is much needed updates in Texas. So you'll hear both of them joining in throughout the webinar, and then in the end, they've got a couple of updates to give you, and I will make sure that we have plenty of time for Q&A. Just as an FYI, this webinar is being recorded. You will receive an email from us afterwards with a recording as well as a short resource guide for you that covers some of the resources that we will talk about today. I always want to be mindful of your time, so I'm going to share my screen and we are going to get started. All right, so you've met me, you've met Kelly, and you've met Justin. The organization, just a little bit about what the SBDC does. If you're here in Amarillo, may have had the pleasure of working with you before, but our SBDC is a department of the College of Business at West Texas A&M University. We kind of do two services on behalf of the university. One, we're really their public economic development outreach arm on behalf of the entire university, not just College of Business. But we also work to provide direct support to entrepreneurs, small business owners. These are either current or aspiring all throughout the Texas Panhandle. We are partially funded by the Small Business Administration. SBDCs are actually an SBA program that operate nationwide, and we've all got our own service areas. Obviously, we work in the Texas Panhandle, but if you are not in the Panhandle and you want some help after this webinar, let me know, and I'd be glad to get you set up with the SBDC in your area. And then thankfully, we received some additional local funding from capital loan partners in the area in the Texas Panhandle in the South Plains, capital CDC. This is a lot of acronyms, and TPRDC. I'm going to see if I can spit all of that out. What do we do? In a nutshell, it boils down to three things, and that's consulting, training, and research. Most of our time is spent on consulting, and that's where we're working with people just like you, one-on-one, to help answer technical questions about their business. What else here? And real quick, who are we? You've already met me. I've got two full-time business consultants that are pictured here on the slides. Aaliyah is our program intern. You'll be hearing from her with a copy of this webinar probably Friday. I think she's out tomorrow. If you've ever seen my editing skills, you know that I will not be editing that video and sending it out. We leave that to Aaliyah the pro. And then I think actually on the webinar, we have two brand new consultants, literally just started on Monday. Their focus is rural outreach, specifically disaster recovery. They're going to be spending a lot of time up in the Northeast Panhandle where we had the wildfires. I know Maricella's on, Annie may be on in a bit if she's not already, but they are so new, they're not even pictured there. So if any of us can be of service to you, that's what we're here to do. Please let us know. All right, I want to make sure, so at the end, we're going to have plenty of time for Q&A. We always have lots of questions in this one, but as we're going through these slides, if you have questions that pop up, you're welcome to go ahead and type those into chat just so we don't forget about those, and I'll bring them up in the end. You're also welcome to unmute yourselves at the end as well. All right, we're going to jump into it. So first off, what exactly are cottage laws? So cottage laws relate to the sale of any types of food that are shelf stable, things that do not have to be refrigerated, they don't have to be frozen. If your food product does have to be stored in the refrigerator or the freezer, just keep in mind you're not going to qualify to do business under cottage laws. Those fall under our state health department laws. My rule of thumb when I'm working with clients to figure out does it fall under cottage laws is if you can put it in your pantry, if you can sit it on your shelf and it's good for some time, it almost certainly will fall under cottage laws. So in Texas, our Constitution is almost 200 years old. Cottage laws are still very much an infant when you compare those to the Texas Constitution. They were not established until 2011. That was only 13 years ago. They are a baby still very much. So lots of changes that still need to be made. I don't think there's any piece of legislation that gets passed and it's perfect. No one expects that. Kelly was able to do a lot of advocating on behalf of all of us and helped pass some updates in 2019. I know last session they worked really hard on some updates that came very close to passing. I hope they do next year, and she'll update you on those in a little bit. But obviously, there's still so much work to be done. There are other states that they have some different limits on things that they can do that we really want to try to model that program and give you a lot more freedom in how you run your business. So what can you sell under cottage laws? Again, anything that can sit on a shelf and is going to be stable for at least a few days. So the most common things that you'll see people selling are baked goods. So that's the cookies and the cakes. You can sell whole fruit. I've got an asterisk next to that, and I'll talk about that in just a little bit. There's something you need to know about that. Canned goods, most salsas. Kelly's going to jump in a little bit. We'll talk a little bit more about what you can and can't do with that. One that I have always found is surprising with my own clients is coffee. You can actually roast coffee at home and sell that under cottage laws. Granola, nuts, you can roast some nuts. You can actually make your own extracts. If you want to make vanilla extract, that's something that you can do under cottage laws as well.
I'm going to chip in here, Gina, and note that the coffee is only the coffee beans. You cannot sell the beverage coffee.
That is very correct. Thank you for adding this, because remember, if you go out and you brew coffee, you've ground those beans and you've introduced bacteria. There's bacteria that will grow in that coffee. It has to be something that can sit on that shelf and stay dry for quite some time. You can do dip mixes. I've got a client that does dip mixes from home, sells those at shows. You can do honey. I've got an asterisk next to that. There are just some additional labeling requirements for honey, but you can sell honey under cottage laws. Chocolate dipped fruit, so long as that fruit is not cut. It's got to be whole. If you're selling a chocolate covered strawberry, I always hate the little greens on top of it. You can't cut the top of that off. It's got to be whole. Otherwise, you've introduced bacteria. You can, however, do fruit pies with cut fruit because once you have baked that, the bacteria has been killed. Those do qualify. Jams and jellies, kind of the same idea as the canned goods. You can do most of those. There's just some additional information that we're going to show you in a little bit about how to go about that. Breads, another one that my clients also find interesting is pasta. I haven't found anybody yet that is selling pasta under cottage laws, but you absolutely can. Once you've processed that and dried that, the bacteria should have been killed off from that. All right, so when we talk about the canned goods, you've got three different options to decide how to go about this. So one, if you want to sell canned goods, maybe you want to sell a jam or a jelly and you're not sure what qualifies, you can actually go onto the state health department website and they have some pre-approved recipes. I've never had anyone do this, frankly. I think the reason that we get into this, and I've done Simone selling under cottage laws myself, is because we have our own recipe, we have our own creation that we want to sell. I've never had anybody that pulled one of those recipes, but there is the option. If you have a recipe that you want to use, you can submit that for approval from the state health department. They'll look at that and decide if it qualifies or not. The other option, you can test that with a calibrated pH meter, and there are some regulations on the level of pH. You have to log and label those batches for at least 12 months. Kelly, this is where you are the expert. You want to step in and add a description to that.
Sure. And you did a great job. So one thing I did want to clarify is that DSHS does not approve recipes. They approve recipe sources.
Thank
So,
you.
um, you can find a recipe source like a canning book that that is in wide publication, and you can submit that to DSHS and ask them to approve that as a source, but they don't actually approve, like if you have your grandma's recipe for pickled beets, they're not going to evaluate that recipe. They don't have that capability. So, but you can use your grandma's recipe. As Gina said, you can use your grandma's recipe for pickled beets as long as you test every batch, each and every batch with a calibrated pH meter, and you log that and keep a record of it for 12 months. I also wanted to clarify that with canned goods, what we're talking about, there's actually three categories of this. There's acidified, plant-based foods. So that's for canning. So it has to be acidified. We're not talking about low acid product like just canning green beans. So everything that you can has to be acidified to that 4.6 or below. And what also falls under this category is the pH. The pickled fruits or vegetables, but that must be fruits or vegetables. So no pickled quail eggs or anything like that. Has to be fruit or vegetable based. And then we also have fermented products that fall within all the same rules, but that must be vegetable based. So that doesn't include kefir is a fermented product, a fermented dairy product. So that would not be eligible as a cottage food product because it's not vegetable based. So the big thing, the big takeaway for canned, pickled, and fermented foods is that everything has to be plant-based, either fruit or vegetable. And you have to use an approved recipe or a recipe from an approved source, or test it yourself to make sure that you have that pH under 4.6.
Thank you. This is why you are my cottage law idol. That was wonderful, Kelly. And I'll add, you can get one of those meters. They're widely available. You can get it on Amazon for about $20. So don't let that scare you off. Thank you. All right, so we've talked a little bit about what you can sell. I hope you kind of see the theme there. If you can put it on a jar and a bag on your counter in your pantry, you can likely sell that under cottage laws. But what can you not sell? So I've picked out some of the things that I see most commonly at the SBDC that people want to sell that just don't qualify and need to be done in a state licensed commercial kitchen. Again, the general rule of thumb is anything that should be refrigerated or frozen, but we'll give you a couple of details. Meringue pies, even if you had it could be a fruit pie with meringue on top. I don't know if that's a thing. But you could not sell that under cottage laws. The meringue is not shelf stable. It's been a few years since those got really, really popular here, but the charcuterie boards, we saw so many people trying to sell those from home. If those have got meats and cheeses on it, anything that's not shelf stable, that does not qualify. What might qualify, I've seen some people do, is to do kind of a dessert charcuterie board that's got maybe chocolate covered pretzels, cookies, things like that. That you can do, but not the traditional charcuterie board with the meats and cheeses. Beef jerky, that one comes up fairly often at the SBDC. I know that it is shelf stable, but meats are actually regulated at the federal level for the most part, so the cottage laws do not qualify for that. To do beef jerky, you do have to have a commercial kitchen. Cut fruit. So we've talked a little bit about fruit. The issue with cut fruit is that once you've cut that, you have introduced bacteria to that. It is no longer shelf stable. I know if you go to my house right now, I've got a bowl of apples sitting on the counter. I wish I could say I was a better person and I was going to eat those, but they do look really pretty. Those have probably been on my counter for 2, 3 weeks. They're fine still. If I had cut that apple within a couple of hours, I would not have wanted to eat that. And I will back up just a little bit on the slide where I mentioned that you can sell whole fruits. I know I had the asterisk by that. Wherever my slide is at. Am I going back? Oh, I'm going the wrong way. So when I mentioned the whole fruit, you are able to sell frozen whole fruit. You still cannot cut the whole fruit, but you can sell that frozen. And I've got the asterisk there. Just like the honey, there are some additional labeling requirements on that. So if that's something that you're interested in, let me know and I can send you any of the special labeling requirements later. Juices, same idea as cut fruit. Once you've cut that, you have introduced bacteria. And same as Kelly mentioned with coffee, it's not shelf stable. Pet treats and pet food. Same thing as beef jerky. I know a lot of those are shelf stable, but they are just regulated at a different level. We just don't have the authority right now to include those in cottage laws. Meals to go, we see that a lot at the SBDC. I feel like this is the new charcuterie board for us in the area. I love the idea of meals to go. I've bought some myself, but they actually come here to our facility where we have the incubator and the commercial kitchens have to be cooked there. Obviously, those are generally not going to be shelf stable. Cheesecake, not shelf stable as well. Pumpkin pies, and I always include this one. Because I know around Thanksgiving, you go to the grocery store, you go to Sam's, Costco, wherever you shop, and you do see the pumpkin pies that are just sitting out. They're not refrigerated. Those have lots of preservatives in them that are keeping them shelf stable. The pumpkin pies that you and I are making at home are not going to be shelf stable. They don't have those preservatives in them. And I always have to include tamales. Tamales are definitely not shelf stable. I know we all like to buy tamales at Christmas time from everybody's grandma who makes them at home. I'm going to keep doing that. But no, technically you cannot sell tamales under cottage law. Those do have to be produced in a commercial kitchen. And then Kelly went into details on the canned vegetables. If you do that testing yourself and it's got a pH level above 4.6, it is not safe for consumption and you're not able to sell those under cottage laws. Those need to be monitored very closely. Kelly, anything that you want to add there? Or any products that I've missed?
No, I think you covered probably some of the most popular offenders in that category. And it's hard for the bakers. I understand that because a baker doesn't really differentiate between baking a cake and a cheesecake or a lemon meringue pie. And we did try to get those added last session. They were in the bill that came very close to passing, but it did not pass. So better luck next time.
And this presentation may look very, very different in a year, so I hope it does. All right, so we've talked about what you can sell, what you cannot sell. Something else that's very important under cottage laws is where you can sell, because it really does make a difference. The general rule of thumb is you've got to be selling direct to the consumer. There's got to be some personal interaction with them somewhere. And we're going to go into more detail. So I've got that highlighted, but I've also got the word Texas highlighted. That's very important as well, These are state rules. These are not federal rules. We'll go into that. I cannot go to New Mexico, even though that's only a couple of hours away from me. I cannot go to New Mexico, Oklahoma, and sell under cottage laws, under Texas cottage laws. I could go over there and sell under their own cottage laws if I had pursued that. So where can you sell? You can certainly sell from your home. That's what the original law is intended to cover, and that's what most people that we see are doing. These were greatly expanded in 2019, in part thanks to Kelly's hard work on this. You can now sell farmers markets. You can sell at a vendor fair. And what do I mean by vendor fair? How is that different from a farmer's market? A vendor fair, if you are from the Amarillo area, would be something like Ruffles and Rust that we have at the Civic Center. The law used to not allow you to sell at places like that, but thanks to that legislation in 2019, you can now sell at those places. You can sell at another business, but it has to be you. Remember, there's got to be personal interaction from you, the baker, the producer. When I say you can sell at another business, I mean if Kelly decides that she wants to bake and operate under cottage laws and Gina has a retail storefront, I can invite Kelly to come and table and make sales there. That's fine. I, Gina, cannot buy from Kelly and sell on her behalf. You can also personally deliver to people in Texas. I know when I had my business, I pretty much either had people come to my house or I would deliver to them within a radius. You can do a farm stand, so similar to a farmer's market, you see the peach stands on the side of the road if you're taking a vacation to Dallas. You can sell at a place like that. You can now, thanks to that updated legislation in 2019, sell on the internet and the mail, but we need to talk about that. So when I had my business, I had a website. You could place an order online. I suppose you could send me mail. It would be the same idea. I don't think anybody does mail order, but that is the same idea. You could place your order on my website, tell me exactly what you wanted, but there still has to be some personal interaction. There's the way the law reads now. And so if you ordered on my website, you either had to come to my house to get it, or I had to take it to you. I cannot sell something on the internet and then turn around to ship it to you. There's no personal interaction there. So you have to make sure either you take the order in person and then you could ship it to them, or if I'm going to take the order online, I've got to meet you somewhere and hand that off to you. Now, something I like to tell my own clients to be mindful of. Two things. Just remember the zoning rules in your neighborhood and your neighbors as well. So I know changing some of the zoning rules is something that we'll probably talk about in a little bit. They were working on that this last year. They cannot prevent you right now from operating under cottage laws in your neighborhood. Kelly, will you give us a reminder? Are there some HOAs that can still?
Yeah, I mean, cottage food law is completely unaffected by HOA rules. So, your HOA is pretty much has godlike powers. And so if it's against the rules, in your HOA controlled neighborhood to run a home business or to have customers visiting your home, then that is something that you need to take into account, and do whatever it is you need to do to not generate a complaint or attract too much attention to yourself. But the HOA can tell you, that you can't have the customers come to your home. And in fact, that was something that happened to a friend of mine here near Austin. She moved to a new home and had been told by the realtor that, oh yeah, it'll be fine. And it happened to be like her first week there, Easter, and she had,
Mhm.
tons of custom cookie and goodie orders for Easter, and she had put her little sign out on the front porch so that her customers would know, how to find her new house. And she really annoyed her neighbors, and somebody camped out outside her house and took pictures. of all the customers visiting her home and turned it into the HOA. And so she lived like that for a year. They told her she couldn't have any customers visit her home, and there's nothing in the cottage food law at that time that prevented that. Now, something we've actually been trying to get this remedied in a different bill that has come to be known as the chicken bill. And this is the one that would say that HOAs or cities can't prevent you from having up to 6 backyard chickens. And back in 2021, we got cottage foods added to that bill and saying that an HOA could not prevent you from having a cottage food business. Now the chicken bill has not passed either. It's running into kind of a dead end in the Senate, even though the House keeps passing it. But the moral of the story is your HOA does control. So do what you have to do to stay under their radar if that's against the rules where you live.
Oh, thank you. And really this first point, all it boils down to, and this is not specific to cottage laws. I tell this to all of my clients that have businesses that they work from home, is just be polite and mindful of your neighbors. Do I mind if my neighbor is selling pies? I don't. If they get really popular and the street's constantly full and I don't have anywhere to park and it gets loud, I'm going to be annoyed. So just be mindful and polite to your neighbors. The second point that I always make is that local rules do still apply. I'll give you an example of this. I had a client come in a few years ago, wanted to produce a product that was absolutely fine to produce under cottage laws. We got everything worked out. He had his labeling set. And I asked him, well, how are you going to distribute this? Where are you going to set up? He planned to pitch a tent in the ditch in the right of way off of a highway. I said, sir, you cannot do that. If you survive that, I can promise you that DPS is really not going to be very happy with you. So local rules like that do still apply. All right, so we've talked about where you can sell. Just remember, the most important piece of that is there's got to be some personal interaction with you. They need to know that it was you that made that it was made under cottage laws. So where can you not sell? So you can't sell wholesale. We talked about this a little bit. If I have a store and Kelly is baking at home under cottage laws, I can invite Kelly to come and set up a table at my store all day, every day. Can I buy wholesale from Kelly and resell that? Right now, I cannot. And I know that's something that Kelly's working on in upcoming legislation. It may change, but as it stands now, again, we're going back to that personal interaction from you, the producer. You have to be directly involved. We've talked about it a little bit. You cannot sell outside of Texas. I suppose if you were selling on the internet, you could certainly take an order from anybody who wanted to order, but they're going to have to come to Texas to pick that up from you. Along the same lines of the wholesale, you cannot sell to restaurants and bakeries. I've had a couple of clients, one that did coffee roasting, another one that baked, and they had some restaurants that wanted to buy from them. Cannot do that. That's same lines as wholesale. You've got to be there making that sale. All right, a few other regulations to be aware of. So cottage laws are set at the state level, and the local health department does not have anything to do with it. So the only time that the local health department can ever get involved is if you are just doing something that is so reckless, there is an immediate threat to health of your customers. They do have some authority to step in then. But if you're operating under cottage laws, no one can come into your home. Again, going back to unless I'm doing something, maybe I'm freezing fruit and then I'm letting it sit out and there's bacteria growing and they start to find out about that. Yes, people can step in if their lives in danger, but for the most part, no one is allowed to actually enter your home. There's not any kind of an inspection required when you get your certification, your licensing for your cottage business. And just keep in mind, all items, the state rule says they have to be packaged to prevent contamination. It's not difficult to do. Make sure that they are in something that seals. I had a question, it may have been last year, I can't remember if I asked you, Kelly, or it may have been Judith with Farfa about wedding cakes. Do I have to have some enormous box where I can seal a wedding cake? The answer was no, just be reasonable with it. Is there something you can do to gently cover that without messing up the icing on your cake? The laws, I think, are very reasonable. They want you to be able to provide services like that. Nobody expects you to go out and buy a plastic box that is the size of your counter. So the certificate that you're going to need to operate under cottage laws is called the Texas Food Handler's Certificate. The good news is you can actually get that certificate online. That's how I got my own when I ran my business a few years ago. If I remember right, I paid $6, I think, to do that online. You go, the education is actually really short. I watched some videos, read information. It's generally concerned with the handling of food, refrigeration of food, and some of it ironically doesn't even apply to cottage laws because it is talking about refrigeration. It was a really easy test to pass. Kelly, do you remember off the top of your head, how long are those good for? Is it 2 years?
2 years.
Okay, so if you, hopefully you can afford $6 every 2 years to renew that certificate. As the laws stand right now, your gross has to stay under $50,000 in revenue. If you sell more than that, currently you would need to switch and operate out of a commercial kitchen. You'll hear some updates in a little bit. Kelly and Justin are both working really hard to try to get that ceiling raised. Can you have employees? I've had that question come up a lot, and yes, you can. But remember, the intent of cottage laws is that you are working from your home. Your employees cannot produce things from their own home and bring them to you. Right now, as it stands, you have to be doing all this from your home. And I believe that's another area that Kelly and Justin are working to have updated.
Yeah, and if you don't mind if I jump in,
Sure.
if you have an employee, there's nothing in the law that says they have to work from your home, but it does say that they have to have their own food handler's certificate if they are not supervised by you.
That is wonderful to know. Thank you.
So, if you invite them to your home to work with you on something and they're under your supervision at all times, then they don't need to get their own food handler's card. But if they're working not under your supervision, for instance, say you're have a booth at a farmer's market and you have an employee, and I'm talking a legitimate employee, someone who is on the payroll and you pay payroll taxes on. If you leave them in charge of your booth, and you go do something else, maybe you have a different market, then they would have to have their food handler's permit in order to be working for you unsupervised.
That is wonderful information. Thank you. All right, we are almost done. Let's talk about labeling requirements because that's pretty strict in Texas. It's not difficult to do. That's one thing that I want you to know. So we've got a label put together for a business that we're going to call Panhandle Pastries. And I've outlined everything that has to be on there. Obviously, you have to have the name of the business. That's a state requirement. You have to have the name of the product. Something that I've been asked about with my clients and that I actually did with my own labels when I had my business. When I designed that label, I left an area blank where you would put the name of the product, and I would just write the name of the product because I would have multiple products that I sold. It doesn't necessarily have to be pre-printed, but you do have to have the name of the product. The next thing on the list is that cottage law disclosure. And something that's very, very important on there, it needs to be on there exactly it is written here. That's how it's written in the laws. You cannot deviate from the wording on there. You've got to include information about common allergens. On my own labels, I approached this the same way that I did the name of the product. You have the option, if you want to have that label just for the strawberry cookies, you can list the individual allergens, but what I did on mine was I listed all of the common allergens. What are there, 7, 8 of them, I think, Kelly?
There used to be 8, and they recently, FDA recently added sesame, so there are 9 now.
Good. So what you could do is list all 9 of those, and then I would circle which ones were in each one of those products. Either way is allowable. And then the last thing that you absolutely have to have on there is your business address, but keep in mind your business address is your home address. That's another area that I know Kelly and Justin are really working to get updated, to not have to include that, just so there's more privacy for you, the producer. All right, and then I like to include just a couple of business basics, the stuff that I'm talking about with all day on my side at the SBDC, a few things that I want you to know about. The first one is sales tax. So keep in mind that on the majority of food items that you're going to be selling, sales tax is not required. It's just like when you go to the grocery store, you buy a loaf of bread, you're not going to pay sales tax on that. One thing to know, if you're selling candy items like that, typically there is going to be sales tax on that. That's one of the few exceptions. Another very strange caveat with the sales tax rules that I like you to know. So imagine that you are at a farmer's market and you sell cinnamon rolls. If I'm to buy a tray of 12 cinnamon rolls from you, or even one single cinnamon roll from you, so long as that's packaged in a way where it's very clear that I'm taking it to go, there's no sales tax on that. But if I buy a cinnamon roll from you and you put it on a napkin and maybe you give me a fork as well, and it's very clear from the way that I bought it that I'm supposed to eat it while I'm at the farmer's market, I know it doesn't make any sense, but all of a sudden that cinnamon roll becomes taxed. For the most part, the items that you're selling, because remember the packaging requirements, it needs to be sealed. You don't want to get contaminated with bugs at the farmer's market. If you just make sure that everything you're selling is sealed, you're good to go. It doesn't mean that it has to be sealed so tight I can't get into it at the market. Wrap it in plastic, put it in a plastic container, whatever that looks like, and your items are going to be tax exempt. If you do need that sales tax permit, I'm glad to help you with that, but you can also get it really easy online. You go to comptroller.texas.gov, takes you about 10 minutes. It's name and address, industry kind of information that you enter, and you will get your certificate in the mail in a few weeks, but you'll actually have your ID number right then. Legal structure, I want you to just have some real basics so you can make the decision that's right for you. And obviously, I'm glad to help you down the road. The easiest, the most common legal structure that we see here is going to be the sole proprietor. You're going to file that in whatever county you want to do business in. It's a one-page form. I can send that to you. Sometimes county clerks have those on hand as well. The state maximum right now, I believe, is $24 is the most that they can charge you to file that. And you don't file it necessarily in the county that you live in. You file it in the county, or it could be multiple counties where you're going to do business at. If you are in the Amarillo area, I usually recommend filing in Potter and Randall counties, just because Amarillo is split in half between the two, and that way you've got the whole metro area covered. There's not a limit on the number of counties that you can file in. Your taxation on those is really, really simple. It's just going to flow through to your 1040. You still need to track all of your business revenue and expenses separately. So what you're going to have is your 1040, just like you file every year. You're going to have 2 more forms that you add on to that. Your Schedule C, that's got your business revenue and expenses on it. Your Schedule SE, that's going to have your self-employment tax onto it. You use those to figure up your net profit, and then that's the number that flows over to your 1040 and is included in any additional income that you might have. So they're super easy to set up, as you can see, but here's the downside to sole proprietorships. One, there's really no personal liability protection for you. If Kelly again decides to, get into cottage laws and maybe she accidentally nicked some whole fruit that she's going to sell me and I eat that and I get sick, I can't sue the business. There is no separate business. Kelly is the business. I'm going to be suing Kelly personally for that. So in that instance, keep in mind that your personal assets are at risk. In Texas, the law does exclude your homestead if you own your home, and then a vehicle for each you and your spouse. But aside from that, if that happened to me, if Kelly sold me the bad fruit and I knew that Kelly had some nice jet skis in her driveway, I could potentially go after that jet skis or force Kelly to sell those in order to pay me. So your second option, and the one that we probably see used most commonly with our larger food producers, is an LLC. It's going to be slightly more costly to file, but what the LLC does, I tell my clients, think of it as a separate person. It creates a completely separate entity that's going to take on that liability. Where with the sole proprietor, you're going to file about $20 to take care of that. LLCs, we won't go into the different options for filing, but it's going to range anywhere from $300 to a few $1,000s if you use an attorney, which I always recommend. There are a few additional operating rules that you want to keep in mind with those. You've got a few different taxation options with that. Once you get large enough where you are able to pay yourself a reasonable salary, and we're talking $40,000, $50,000, and do owner draw on top of that, you'll want to look at S corp taxation. That's a conversation that we can have one-on-one in a consulting session, though. But the main reason why I want you to know about LLCs is because we've created that separate person, that separate entity. It is now going to hold the liability for your business. So the same case where Kelly's got her business, she nicks the fruit, I eat it, I get sick, and I want to sue. I'm no longer suing Kelly personally. I'm going to be suing her LLC. It doesn't mean that I can't force her to liquidate assets of her LLC to pay me, but now I at least cannot go after the jet skis. So you're seeing either way you pick, there are some liability, anything in food, there's liability involved. How do you fix that? No matter which entity you choose, you want to make sure that you've got really good insurance. Whether I sue Kelly personally or I sue Kelly's business, if I win, she still has to pay me, and that's where insurance comes in. Oddly enough, the state does not require that you have insurance. If you're going to participate in a farmer's market, a vendor fair, a Ruffles and Rust, one of those, they would almost certainly require insurance. What I've seen lately is $1 million is pretty standard, and that's actually a very affordable insurance policy. So don't be scared by that number. You're going to want to have two different kinds of insurance, and your agent will help you with this. You want to have liability insurance. That's what kicks in if I see Kelly and I win. That's what keeps her from having to sell the jet skis or liquidate business assets. And then you're also going to want to have insurance on your inventory. If you're operating this business in the house, it catches on fire and it burns down. Your insurance on the home actually will not cover business property. You want separate insurance on this inventory. That's what's going to pay you back for not just your raw goods. If you've got mixers, ovens that you're using special for this, that's what's going to pay you back for that. It's really not difficult to get it. If you've got a current provider, you can absolutely contact them. My personal favorite way to do that is to go through a broker who's really familiar with commercial insurance, and they're going to be able to shop that rate for you with multiple providers. Oh, I think that is the last of my slides. Before we get into Q&A, and you're welcome to go ahead and enter questions in chat, or you can unmute in a second if you want. I want to get those updates that I mentioned from Kelly and Justin. Kelly, just because you're on the top of my screen, I have pinned you. Will you give us an update on everything that you're working on over the next year or two before that next legislative session?
Sure. And thank you. You did a great job with your presentation. I really enjoyed it. So, you mentioned that, no law comes out of the gate just perfect. Keep in mind that cottage foods, at that time around 2010 or so, was a very edgy concept. And with each law that we have passed, we've actually been on the cutting edge of the bleeding edge of what states are doing as far as cottage food laws, but they have caught such fire that what keeps happening is that other states keep upping the game. And then, of course, Texas with our biennial legislative sessions, it takes us 2 years to catch up. So we've updated the original law in 2011. We updated in 2013, and we updated in 2019 as well. And it's just, it's a game. It just keeps escalating. It's really actually amazing to see the boundaries that are being pushed with what we can do under cottage foods. So we had an amazing bill last session in 2023 that did die. It didn't die on its own merits. It made it through both houses with very convincing majorities. It died on the last night. 7 bills were ahead of it on the calendar, and it died only because of legislative shenanigans. Tempers flare, and one group decides they want to kill another bill that's further down the line, and they waste time, and they let the clock hit midnight, and everything dies, and they don't seem to care what else they killed, as long as they kill that one bill that they wanted to go down. So the bill that we had, it did 6 things actually. It was a very broad bill, and actually there were about 10 cottage food bills filed. There was a lot of interest, but this one bill by Senator Kolkhorst, who has been our champion ever since 2011, kind of wrapped those all up in one bill. So the first thing it would do, which people might not think of a lot of the time, but it would have allowed a nonprofit organization to operate as a cottage food operator, because right now cottage food operators must be an individual. And we had someone who wanted to start a nonprofit organization selling cottage foods, for a nonprofit, and that technically is not allowed. And so it did that. It would have increased that sales cap from $50,000 a year sales to $100,000. Now, my own personal preference is to get rid of the sales cap. About half the states don't have any sales cap at all. And my argument has always been that you're naturally limited by your home kitchen and how much you can produce. However, the legislators didn't want to go that way. We did have a couple bills that took away the income cap completely, but Senator Kolkhorst wanted to keep the some kind of a cap. So it was doubled to 100,000. The bill would have allowed wholesale and resale of cottage foods. There would have been some rules surrounding that, but that was a big barrier that would have been broken, being able to get your product into like a grocery store. It would have made those home addresses on the labels optional. It would have replaced them with the name, city, zip code, and then you could provide them with your phone number or your email address after you've received payment. And that's a big issue for a lot of people. We had someone testify whose husband was a corrections officer in a very small town, and she didn't want her address out floating around out there. Very understandable. I was just contacted by a police officer this week who said, I don't want to put my home address on my cottage food product. And unfortunately, there's no exception to that. That's been the way that it's been written ever since 2011. And I really hope that we can go back and get that taken care of, put in some protections for privacy for people. An issue that we've been having for a couple years now, and it is funny because we didn't for about the first 9 or 10 years of the cottage food law, we didn't have this issue because the law is explicit. The law says that a cottage food producer is not a food establishment. And then suddenly around 2021, we had these health departments around the state suddenly start requiring food establishment permits, temporary food establishment permits of cottage food producers when they wanted to sell at events. And this is absolutely not allowed. And it was weird the way that it just popped up out of nowhere 10 years into the cottage food law. And we've Homemade Texas and the Farm and Ranch Freedom Alliance have written some strongly worded letters to several health departments. We actually got the Tarrant County Health Department to refund permit fees that it improperly charged to a cottage food operator. But this bill would have very explicitly stated that a cottage food operator is not subject to permits. And it seems funny to have pass a law to tell health departments to follow the law. But This one actually had some beautiful language in it that I'm still fond of, that said that that the health department could not continue to employ a person who knowingly violated that part of the law. So that would have really solved a lot of problems and helped me write a lot fewer letters if that had passed. And then the big one to a lot of people, the final one, was it would have allowed provided for refrigerated baked goods. So cheesecakes, meringues, actually even like vegetarian casseroles, could, anything that you bake and doesn't have meat and requires refrigeration would have been covered under that. But unfortunately, like I said, there were hijinks and it did not pass.
Yeah. And that's a really good highlight of the things that we certainly hope to see in the next legislative session and get passed. And Kelly mentioned the Farm and Ranch Freedom Alliance. That director, Judith, I have two favorite people with cottage laws, and it's Kelly and Judith. They're both incredible, and that resource sheet that you get with your email on Friday will also have information on FARFA. And then speaking of FARFA, I know Justin is very involved with them as well. Justin is driving right now to pick up feed, I think he said. So we're gonna see if he said his service was spotty. I'm gonna ask him to unmute. We'll see if he's able to talk with us for a second on what he's working on.
Yeah, so hopefully this will stay connected long enough. Short end of it is that we're trying to make sure that last session we had a really good showing for the lobbying, and so we really want to try to get even more people involved for next session. So becoming part of FARFA, and then we had a number of in-person lobby days. So if that's something that's interesting to you or that you feel like is worth your time, it definitely can make a huge difference. And so if you're interested in that, I'd recommend joining FARFA or reaching out to me personally. But as Kelly said, we're just trying to work on revamping those cottage food laws, and hopefully through a combination of what Kelly does, individuals with FARFA, and trying to work with the health departments and everything else, we can get something figured out. So that's the long and short of it.
I love that. And I love that all of you work so well together. Nobody's competing. Nobody's trying to take any glory for it. We're really just trying to solve problems and do that together. So thank you so much. I will make sure that all that is on your resource guide. So now I'm going to open it up to questions while we've got Justin and Kelly here. Again, you are welcome to type them into chat if you have anything, but you're also welcome to just unmute yourself if you'd like to. Just a sec. While I'm waiting, I'm going to pop up a poll right quick. I mentioned to you all at the first that we are federally funded. One of the caveats of federal money is that you have to survey everyone about everything that you do. So there's a short poll that's popped up if y'all don't mind answering that for you. But if you've got questions, again, you're welcome to unmute yourselves. If there's anything else that SBDC can do for you, there is the team. That's us with our partners at the Enterprise Center. They have the incubator that houses the commercial kitchen here at WT. And you can see my phone number, email, and website on there. I'll wait just a sec, see if there's any questions. All right, I don't see anything else in chat. If there's anything that we can do for you with regard to cottage laws or anything else with your small business, please don't hesitate to get in touch. You've got our email there on the screen. Again, on Friday, you're going to get an email from Aaliyah Whitler, our student, and it'll have the recording of today's session, as well as that resource guide in there. Thank you so much for joining in. I hope you have a wonderful day. I hope it's a beautiful sunny day like it is here in Amarillo. Have a good rest of your week.